Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Voice of Authority, brought to you by Carter Jonas and GLE and Haptic Architects and London Square Partners. My name is Toby Fox. I'm the Managing Director at 3Fox, the marketing agency for councils. And our job is to keep our network of councils and developers and investors and their influencers and advisors connected. And one of the ways that we continue to do that is by interviewing public sector leaders and officers to give our network a deeper understanding of the vision for a place and how it will grow and evolve by hearing from the people shaping that vision and what makes them tick. You can find an archive of hundreds of written and recorded interviews at thevoiceofauthority.co.uk, and the format of them is really simple. We ask the Voice of Authority 7 questions. The first 3 cover their wish list and the challenges they must overcome to deliver that list and the partners that they're seeking to help them. And then we'll ask our Voice of Authority what constitutes good development and who or what has shaped their views on growth and the watershed moments in their life and career that have led them to our screens today. And then finally, we'll ask them what they get up to outside of work. What are the interests and passions that drive and motivate them and perhaps shape those views and ambitions? And for the last fortnight, we've been inviting questions from viewers through Twitter and LinkedIn, and we'll be inviting a viewer to put their question to our Voice of Authority during the session today. And we're delighted that today those questions are going to be put to the Deputy Leader and Chair of the Housing, Economy and Business Committee at the London Borough of Sutton, Councillor David Bartolucci. A councillor since 2014, David was elected Deputy Leader in May this year, taking on the Housing, Economy and Business Committee brief. And alongside its strategic partnership with world-leading institutions in cancer research and care to develop the London Cancer Hub, Sutton Council claims to have visionary and ambitious plans for the borough's economic renewal and regeneration. And the acquisition of much of Sutton Town Centre is enabling the development of extensive co-working spaces, an art house, cinema and other cultural and health facilities. And further prominent town centre developments are on the horizon and quite imminent now in a programme seeking to blend heritage with high-quality public realm, estate regen, award-winning direct delivery and retrofit programmes. So let's get the interview started in our traditional manner by asking Councillor Bartolucci. David, what are the top 3 things on your wish list for Sutton?
Hi Toby, and hi to the audience. Thanks for inviting me here. Well, it's obviously everything that's underpinning the work that we're considering at the moment at the council for all our departments is to achieve our net zero ambitions and climate change. So in terms of the corporate plan moving forward, the bedrock and certainly the thing that underpins many of our decisions will have that in mind broadly. It's strange when I was considering the question about growth and development in this area and the 3 items on the wish list. It's odd, obviously, when you look at growth, there's a traditional way of defining growth, I guess, from a business perspective. But obviously growth in local authorities can mean very many different things, and growth can frequently be to an authority something that is going to cost you more money rather than something that creates the wealth. And so I guess for me it was quite an interesting concept because obviously as a council and certainly as the chair of Housing, Economy and Business, one of the areas of growth for us is what I would term as proactive growth, the kind of growth that is traditionally understood within the business environment. But then also there's a kind of reactive growth, I would say, where, for example, population growth, which is something that local authorities have got to be mindful of. Even growth in failing retail sector, so we have many more of them. And so obviously that in itself offers a challenge to, which I know we're going to come on later, to local authorities. And obviously people in time of hardship presenting themselves to the council. Now, why does that matter? Well, because obviously any decision that we make moving forward in my portfolio, particularly with housing, has to be mindful of that. So I guess I start answering your question in those terms, just setting the landscape. Perhaps more specifically, in terms of my wish list, I think I would look at boiling it down to 3 main areas. Obviously, the residential aspects of what we do in my portfolio is critical. So we have a local plan, we have a target that's currently going through a revision, not a complete rewrite, but we have to, after 5 years, establish whether it's still fit for purpose. Obviously, a lot's happened post-COVID. A lot's happened not only in the retail sector, commercially, and in our district centres, but also in terms of house prices, people in temporary accommodation. So essentially homeless people. And for us, my wish list when it comes to residential is to have a good mixture of tenures available to residents, obviously different types of accommodation as well. So we're not after just the single dweller. We're looking for properties that to build properties that are family friendly, age friendly, that have that kind of lifespan. So modern properties that residents can live in, live their lives in, and perhaps grow old in, and they're adaptable. So obviously, again, these homes will need to be energy efficient for obvious reasons. And we're focusing a lot of that work within our district centre, particularly the main town centre, because that's where we feel it and have identified perhaps that's where the growth is best suited. So that would be certainly one of our top priorities, and that goes along with considering some of our estates, our current estates, the longevity of those estates, whether there's more that can be done there in terms of repurposing and regenerating some of those estates. So we have a specific department that's looking into that area. The second item I'd say, or the second item on my wish list would be, I guess broadly speaking, the diversification of our commercial offering in the borough. So we know retail has changed forever. What people want to use their towns, districts for has changed, and it's building in that resilience, building in that offering across culture, civic functions, health functions. Yes, retail still, we're always going to need retail. Some perhaps more versatile office space, possibly tertiary education is something that we're looking at, potentially something that might revitalise our town centre. So it's having that mixture, different reasons for people to come and visit the town centre. Obviously, heritage is an important part because people want to visit a place that's beautiful, that they want to spend time in, that they want to loiter, and they may go in for a particular reason but stick around for something else. So that's something that's quite important. But I must add that I don't lose sight of our district centres, our smaller district centres as well, because whilst a lot of focus is on the main town centre, it's important to me that when we talk about commercial diversity and the offering, is that we're mindful of some of our smaller town districts, which again are well visited and are currently doing really well. And I think finally, the third item on my wish list is improving the employment and skills agenda for the borough. So again, tied in to those two other items is ensuring that the residents in Sutton have those opportunities to gain employment, to find employment, to study, to upskill, be it via the traditional academic routes or through apprenticeships. So things like that are important to us. We do have an employment skills board where partners across the employers and also organisations, volunteer, and also the DWP and people like that are all Sutton College. They're all part of that team. So we've got a good network of brains and people who support that agenda as well. So I guess those would be the three main areas that I would identify as being on my wish list.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, David. Now, all three of those areas come together in the sort of town centre regen programme in Sutton Town Centre, the sort of the main town centre in the borough. You've got the opportunity to put in more cultural amenities. The civic centre is looking at a relocation. There's the opportunity to put health facilities in there as well, redeveloping the shopping centre, renewing the kind of retail offer, and putting in some resi across quite a big site. So that's really sort of brings into focus all of your ambitions. And one of our viewers, I think, was hoping to join us on the screen today. I believe he's having some trouble getting online, so I'll ask the question for him. Darren Nathan at London Square Partners wanted to ask you about the progress you're making with that scheme, because we've heard about it for a few years now. It's had a sort of slightly stop-start nature. So what gives you the confidence, what gives us the confidence that that the town centre regen is really going to happen and you're on your way?
Yeah, good question. If you're talking specifically about the St Nicholas Centre, well, obviously the council acquired the leasehold of the St Nicholas Centre last year. So prior to that, it was a freeholder, and up until that point, there was obviously a managing agent who was specifically designated its business to the old retail model. They clearly wanted to relinquish that investment and sought a buyer. I think it's safe to say that there was some interest, and the interest predominantly came from groups that perhaps were more focused on residential, the residential offering. That obviously became a concern, apart from anything. So, because in doing so, we didn't want to kill off the high street. We didn't want to have those dead spaces, dead frontages. We wanted the high streets to remain vibrant and to reinvent a local point where residents could meet and convene and have fun and live their lives. The difference being is that, like I say, initially is that we never owned the leasehold. So whilst there may have been rumours about the St Nicholas or various projects, I don't know where those rumours came from, but without the leasehold, you weren't going to go very far with the St Nicholas Centre. So it's the stars aligned on this to some degree, because obviously you mentioned the civic centre, the civic building, civic offices. That in on itself wasn't necessarily the next in line to be considered. It was obviously something that was in the background, something that needed to be tackled, something that people were mindful of in terms of the age of the building, in terms of the purpose of the building, in terms of its location, in terms of its energy efficiency moving forward. And it was kind of the spectre at the feast to some degree. But without the opportunity of purchasing the leasehold at St Nicholas, potentially it would have stifled progress at the civic centre. Now, obviously, having two big sites to some degree brings its own strategic challenge, but also it enables one to feed off the other. Reason being that potentially now the civic centre can be released for perhaps more residential a residential offering, bringing that civic function into the high street, which again would add that footfall, would make the civic offices central to the town, which a lot of towns do have. But it wasn't just, this isn't just an exercise in hubris. Whilst the civic function in the high street is a desirable, it wasn't a necessity. Yeah. It's just the fact that these two projects have aligned, and I think it's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity, and it kind of feeds and piggybacks quite well on our future high street fund, which we obviously are developing still. With, I think you mentioned in your opening, the culture offering at Throwley Yard, the arts cinema, the Oru workspace in the middle of the high street, and some other projects that we're looking to bring forward with that funding. So all these pots of funding are kind of being brought together to knit that regen strategy. I'll add also that there are a couple of estates banging the town centre as well, and those are residential estates, which are part and parcel of the broader regen strategy as well.
And that brings me to my sort of last question on this aspect of the interview, which is, You've got and for viewers who aren't familiar with Sutton, you've got a pedestrianised high street with a shopping centre on one side of it. Then you've got a really busy thoroughfare, and then on the other side of that, you've got a civic centre, you've got a car park, you've got a theatre, and quite a bit of additional land. So and you own a number of the sites on the pedestrianised high street as well as the shopping centre. So what's the scale of your ambition in terms of possibly assembling all of those into a single kind of scheme, so that you can do a real kind of visionary, beyond once in a lifetime kind of approach to the town centre with a scheme of vast potential?
Yeah, and I think that's through our economic growth and development department, and also with our strategic planners. That's exactly, I think, what we're trying to deliver. I think you're right in terms of perhaps having that broader narrative. I mean, I think obviously these projects are coming live at their own speed. You know, there's to some degree, we're not trying to rush it, particularly in this current climate. But you're right. I mean, we try to communicate, and certainly the vision is to link all those sites together. You know, we're not taking a project and not operating with it in a silo, or you know, it's got to reflect and mirror and speak to the other projects, you know, and we're very mindful of that. So that's happening, perhaps at the moment happening more in-house at the moment. It's the kind of work that we're doing strategically within the council. But certainly I think if your point is that needs to be more explicit, then I wouldn't disagree with that. When those plans, I think, become more established. So, for example, the St Nick's Centre at the moment has gone out to consultation, but only in terms of the option appraisal of what we were going to do with it. Were residents generally supportive of a redevelopment? If so, what do they want to see replace the St Nicholas Centre? Obviously, the more technical aspects of the design and build is yet to come.
You mentioned the residents. Let's move on to the second part of the interview. Then I want to talk to you about the challenges that you face in delivering your wish list. How responsive, how resistant are residents of Sutton to change, given that what you've discussed today, and when you put the cancer hub in with that and other schemes around Sutton, there is a volume of development that really is unprecedented for the borough. So how are residents feeling about it? How are you gauging resident responses to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's an interesting one, because I think residents are aware of the declining of not just Sutton High Street. Well, Sutton High Street isn't declining as much as some other areas, but we know that the challenges, put it that way, that retailers have on the high street and that businesses have. So they're aware of that. They're aware that the change needs to occur. I think, like a lot of places, Sutton up until now, you know, we're not peppered with a lot of high rise, for want of a better word. And I think perhaps one of the areas that concerns residents is the proliferation of taller buildings. Now, obviously, in terms of and the conversation we're having with residents is a lot of those plans are centred around the town centre because of the transport links, because of the natural footfall to the commercial district, and its close proximity to the stations, and like I say, the transport network. And also, one of the main reasons is to protect our suburban heartlands as well. We've got, you know, a lot of green spaces, a lot of green line streets, Edwardian Victorian buildings, and I think a lot of it is to protect those more suburban areas. And I think on the whole, that message is getting through. Ironically, in Sutton Central, which is also the ward that I represent, so where all this is happening, I can say that those residents are the most, you know, they're the most accepting, if you will, of the change. They know where they live. They know what the town centre is about. They are very responsive. Obviously, they want to see quality builds go up. They want to see a variety of offering in terms of the kind of retail and the commercial district. They want to see, they want to have reasons to come in and visit. They on the whole, they're supportive of the ambition. But I think, like I say, it's a continual journey of consultation, of making sure that what residents want to see in our town centre is what we're delivering, and maybe with a few more bells and whistles. So for example, new health centres or youth centres or the civic function, things that makes so that we can protect the library, so that we can protect aspects of the council offering, just by repurposing it, by doing it slightly differently. And I think they on the whole get that, and I think they're quite embracing of the fact that we're attempting something. Obviously, they want to see reality to it. We know local authorities that have perhaps overstretched themselves. That they're nervous that this is a realistic prospect moving forward. But I think on the whole, that they understand. Yeah.
And the other area of challenge, and feel free to suggest any challenges that you feel you're facing and that you need to overcome. But the other area of challenge I wanted to explore was around your net zero ambitions. You mentioned that as the sort of single overarching item on the wish list. How confident, particularly given the kind of the turbulent economy we're in at the moment and cost inflation and so on, how confident are you that you're able to deliver on those net zero ambitions with all of this growth that you're planning?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, we're going through a process of perhaps slightly aside from what your direct question is. We're going through a process also of retrofitting. So, we are committed to the programme. In fact, today, just before meeting you, I was in another meeting talking exactly of that. Another 70 odd buildings actually in my ward, which are going to be retrofitted. Now, everybody knows that that's actually quite a challenging project in and itself, going over existing buildings and retrofitting them and making them energy efficient. So we are committed. Obviously, far easier to build that technology in. Now, we have recently passed plans for a development just the other side of St Nicholas Way, so just opposite the St Nicholas Centre, next to the cinema, called Beech Street Place, and that is adjacent to a Grade 2 listed church and churchyard, and so there we've both blended in terms of design. We've paid respect to the church and been mindful of the heritage that it neighbours, but also built in a number of energy. The design itself is energy efficient, with heat source pumps and things like that, triple glazing and so on and so forth. So it's stuff that we are delivering on the ground. We're starting to deliver, and obviously one of the reasons to progress with the redevelopment of St Nicholas and bringing in the civic offices is just for that reason, is because to do anything else with it, i.e. to refurbish it, would be throwing, well, it's not so much throwing money down the drain, but it would be harder to do, and you probably wouldn't be costly, very expensive. So yeah, we're very committed to that as part of our strategy moving forward.
And the final, there's a sort of subsidiary bit to that, which I'm putting this to a lot of councils at the moment, which is that if you take into account not just the cost of building, so the cost of your raw materials and your labour and development and so on, but also the cost of not building, so the cost to communities of not having those new healthcare facilities, not having the upgraded public realm, not having better retail and cultural facilities and so on. When you put all of that into the balance, in the situation we're in now, where every day it gets more and more difficult to contemplate building new homes because the price of bricks is going up or whatever, does there come a point where it's too expensive to build?
Good question. Well, I mean, it goes back to my point, I think, at the beginning about growth, that whether we like it or not, we're seeing growth in our temporary accommodation statistics. We're seeing growth in people presenting themselves on, we've always known that, particularly in the southeast, London and the southeast, it's been very difficult to get on the property ladder, but increasingly it's very difficult to actually pay rent. And I've heard of some authorities now where it's become increasingly difficult to pay the social rents. And so, it's something that we're mindful of. Obviously, the HRA accounts are if we're looking at one source of funding, are under pressure. We know that other sources of income or income streams, for example, grants, they're sought quite aggressively by other local authorities. So we're bidding with other, I'm sure, worthy opponents, and obviously we can only go so far, but we would need those private investors to clearly partner with, and obviously some of these projects we will probably be able to deliver in-house along with some grants. Some of it a combination of capital receipts and private investment and those kind of partnerships. So obviously we're mindful of producing affordable homes because that's integral to what we stand for. Because yes, we want those private sale homes, and we appreciate the value of those, certainly to the project itself and to those residents who may and investors who may want to move in. But also, we need to be hitting those social homes and affordable home targets as well for our local residents. So everything kind of needs to work, and everything needs to balance out to achieve all our ambitions.
Thanks, David. And we're going to move on to the next part of the interview now. And you've mentioned private sector investors and developers. What role do you see for the private sector in delivering your ambitions, and what sort of partners are you looking for to help you?
Yeah, that's quite a tricky one in some ways. I mean, I think certainly when it comes to partners, for me it would be someone who understands the challenges that local authorities have, in the way that we ought to understand the challenges that an investor would have. And I think there's whilst our expertise may lie in different areas, I think it's developing that partnership from both an aspect of trust and an aspect of being a critical friend, someone who more broadly isn't afraid of scrutiny, is a visionary, or they ought to be visionaries in terms of, yes, there may be challenges that are experienced across the country in many local authority areas, but understand that as we've moved away from perhaps a boil in the bag high street model, that ultimately there'll always be aspects of development that are replicated up and down the country, but as people are rediscovering their local roots and networks, that building in some of that nuance, building in some of that personality into our district centres is quite important. So yes, we understand, you don't want to reinvent the wheel just for the sake of it, but I think it's quite important that as we move forward, talking about redefining and repurposing our district centres, that well to what? And I know I know the success of a district centre can often bring increased interest, and no one wants to be the gatekeeper to that, because I think that's proof that you've done something right. But equally, I think to begin with, to get the ball rolling, you need to have that vision, that someone who's prepared to help us create that placemaking environment, that identity that will make others want to come. I guess we talked about the design review panel. I mean, that's a classic example where some partners or developers have willingly offered themselves up to the DRP and the scrutiny. Bearing in mind that it's not a binding decision or anything. It's more of an advisory, in an advisory capacity. But nevertheless, to have your plans scrutinised by other architects and independent experts can be quite daunting. And you soon realise the partners that offer themselves up willingly to that and take on board those thoughts. And of course, like I say, it's not something you've got to do, but I think on the whole, those that have embraced that process have gone on to develop much better designs and work better with the council and work better with the community that their project is sort of tailored for. And
just on that, on the design review panel, can I ask, how seriously does the council take design review panel guidance? Do you always stand by what the DRP recommends, or do you find yourselves in conflict with them sometimes?
Well, we do. We're mindful of what they say. I mean, crikey, the DRP, sometimes they don't agree with themselves. So why should we? But no, it's a good steer. It's taken seriously, but you don't just swallow it. You don't just swallow the pill. Put it that way. There's got to be. It's an opportunity to engage with a debate that perhaps hadn't been seen, because otherwise, without them, it's kind of left to the planning department, and whilst they do a fantastic job, you can't get away from the fact that an architect is an architect, right? Or an environmental engineer is just that, and so they bring a wealth of knowledge that perhaps can identify areas of beauty. It's not always about criticism. It's frequently about, a lot of times it's about, I love what you've done there. Perhaps what about doing this that way? So it's been that critical friend, and I think certainly I take it in those terms. But again, it's each plan goes in and is dealt with accordingly, and in the sense that you could have a plan that is obviously not fit for purpose, and you might take the DRP's suggestions more more readily, as it were.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's case by case.
Yeah.
So on the theme of partners, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was what you see as the potential capacity of the local authority to deliver by itself in-house. You mentioned earlier that there are quite a few projects you can take forward yourself. So you've got council-owned companies, you've got your own delivery teams. How much are you relying on outside help, and how much do you think the council can develop itself?
Yeah, I think we do have council companies, and the one that's particularly perhaps most relevant in this area is Sutton Living Limited company, which has taken on some smaller projects. I mean, we're not talking about, they certainly couldn't take on the likes of the town regeneration. So they're very much geared towards smaller sites. We were looking to build some resilience into their business model by selling them some temporary accommodation homes, which the plan being that they would manage them as an income stream, and also the benefit to the residents would be that those properties then would be classed as permanent residencies, or they'd be offered to the residents as permanent residencies, and rent, which obviously is of huge peace of mind to the residents that are currently occupying them as temporary. Unfortunately, that was a win-win. For the company itself, it would have had another income stream, because at the moment they're going out bidding on these smaller contracts, but obviously you get these kind of dips and troughs in what they can and can't do. So having that rental income would have smoothed out some of their business model, as it were. Unfortunately, because of what happened earlier on in the autumn with the mini budget, the gilt market was such that it wasn't prudent to go ahead. We were very close to signing that deal, but unfortunately that's had to be delayed. So yeah, so in terms of the in-house staff, in answer direct to your question, we have a company there, but at the moment they're very much geared to small sites. So something like this would definitely require partnership.
And let's talk a bit about what that partnership might deliver then. What do you see as good development? Where do you point the finger and say we want more of that kind of thing? And what are you most proud of seeing in Sutton?
I perhaps will take this. I'm not going to name sites, but perhaps I would take this more philosophically. This question, I think the way that I see development is obviously it has it needs to serve a purpose. It has to be useful, obvious, but it has to be beautiful. And I think since I've been on the Housing Economy and Business Committee, I've frequently railed against the world of utilitarianism, which in on itself serves a purpose, identifying sites, matching those sites to needs, the whole financial structure around it, the viability assessments around it, all this, yes, that absolutely that is required. But I think what's happened over many decades is we've lost, because subjectivity has become a dirty word, that we've lost, beauty has gone out the window with it. Now, what Oscar Wilde once said, that beauty is pointless. And what he meant by that was not that it wasn't worthy, it didn't serve a purpose. It was that it had to be pointless by its very intrinsic nature. It shouldn't serve a purpose. I.e., it was beauty is intrinsically valuable. If it starts following rules and placating utility, then it kind of loses its natural gift, as it were. And I think that's something that I'm quite mindful of bringing to the town centre development, because at the end of the day, be it public realm, be it the buildings themselves, internally or externally, they need to tell a story. They need to express both the ambition and reflect meaning to the residents that either live there or happen to walk past there or choose to have their coffee outside of the place. And I think it's that sentiment that I'm kind of governed by or drawn to.
So what town centres do you consider to be beautiful or to have beautiful aspects?
I'm not that worldly travelled. No. I neither. This is not a call for some sort of medieval townscape or Georgian high street, beautiful as they are. I think for me, again, if I can keep it broad, is certainly for Sutton would be appreciating the heritage that we've got, certainly in the uppers of the buildings. And we were the first borough in London, I believe, to have been accredited with the Heritage Action Zone from Historic England, where it started at the southern end of the high street, and then we brought it further down to cover some of the buildings further down the high street. So for me, it's very much accentuating those uppers and that heritage with modern, not pastiche, but modern buildings that don't obscure or that help offset. So that beautiful marriage between history and the modern is something that I would consider a success.
So were you pleased with the direction of government planning reforms, when there was a lot of talk, and it's still out there, we're waiting to see the ultimate results of incorporating a notion of beauty into planning regulation.
Yeah, Michael Gove stole that from me, actually. So I'm quite upset, actually, more than anything, because I've been banging on about it for years. But yeah, obviously he's listening to my committee meetings. No, I'm glad to hear that being mentioned. Like you say, the proof will be in the pudding, and what that actually means in terms of, you know, top-down targets. If we don't have them, what happens to permitted development rights? It's given, you know, we're not, I mean, I can't speak for other local authorities, but certainly Sutton are not, you know, we're not NIMBYs. Going back to your question about residents, how do residents feel? We're not NIMBYs. I think we're mindful of getting it right. We're, you know, because once, you know, this is not a service like other perhaps council services where you enter into a contract and perhaps if it doesn't go well or the KPIs change or whatever, that after a year you either break the contract or the contract just naturally runs out. You don't choose to renew it. You know, these are projects that, you know, we talked about once in a lifetime, once in a generation. Well, these buildings will be up for those generations or successive generations. And so I think it's very much, yes, beauty. I'm glad to hear central government steering the ship slightly in a different direction. I'm pleased about that. I'll sit with bated breath to see what comes next and what that actually means in reality.
And in terms of delivering something that's coherent, yeah, a town centre that gives those attributes that you've been talking about, do you feel you're going to have a better chance of delivering that with a number of different developers working towards a sort of single master plan or a single vision for the town centre, or with a single developer, a single development partner who can develop it in phases across the piece?
At this stage, I've got to say that I'm open to both. I think that, you know, I think we would need to, you know, do a more in-depth kind of deep dive as to what that would entail. I mean, I can see pros and cons with both. So, you know, the door is open to both. I mean, that's probably the best I can do at the moment because nothing is actually been nailed down. I certainly wouldn't turn a blind eye to any of those or to either of those options that you've identified there.
Thanks, David. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about, we understand what your wish list is, we understand some of the challenges you face delivering that, some of the partnerships you're looking for, and what you think of as good development. So let's get an idea of how those views have come to be formed. So who or what are the big influences on your career, on your outlook on development and growth and so on?
This was probably the hardest question of all. I was fearing mucking up the other ones. Obviously, I don't know. I guess I have to play the tape back to see how I've done. But this one was one of the ones that I really don't know. I think it's probably got to do with an element of nature and nurture. I mean, it so happens that I was, you know, I'm from Italian stock, or my parents are Italian. I was born in Sutton, raised in Sutton, schooled in Sutton, and I benefited as a kid from all the opportunities that Sutton had, which at that time, which, you know, it was still an outer London borough, poorly served by transport then as it is now. So not a lot has changed, but yeah, you know, there seemed to be a lot of space. There seemed to be a lot of beauty in the town. I remember as a kid, and I think a lot of my passion around, I guess, building has always been the idea of shelter. I think it's always fascinated me as one of those core tenets of life. And I think increasingly I started to be fascinated by the solidity that it offered, that safety that it offered, the beauty that it offered. You know, it was to some degree, you know, nature has its forest and we have our towns, and in the same way that you would walk through a tree-lined or woodland or a meadow and bask in nature's glory, you know, I felt that towns, certainly in the past, seemed to be the urban equivalent of that, and it could be done well or badly, which comes back to my point, I guess, about beauty, about being a place that I would want to meander and loiter and spend time and gaze up and not want to rush through.
Tell us 3 places in the borough that you like to loiter.
My ward, of course. You know, I actually really enjoy one of our estates, believe it or not. It's 50 years old. I do like it there. It's a kind of crosswalk construction. With
Which one is this?
Ben Hill.
Oh, Ben Hill, yeah, in your ward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, it's an estate that means quite a lot to me in the fact that it's one of the largest estates in the borough, mixed tenures, and it's an area of low socioeconomic demographics, but it's a lovely place to be, and it's quiet, and you wouldn't think that you're in the town centre. You know, you go to Sutton, and there's in the evening, and there's it's whilst being a London borough and the 4th, I think, largest district centre in southwest London, it kind of feels that you could be, you know, somewhere in some smaller town in the Shire somewhere. It's a lovely place to be. In Sutton, I do like walking. You know, we've got some lovely stock buildings, some Edwardian buildings. I currently I love a couple of parks in the town. Grove Park over in Coshalton Central is a lovely area to be. The ponds there are delightful, offset by All Saints Church. You know, having 3 young boys, so I'm constantly in parks with football and whatnot. Beddington is a lovely place to be. It's a lovely park. But yeah, we have lots of lovely streets. I mean, just the other day I was in Sutton High Street, just walking across the High Street to get to Manor Park, you know, which is a green flag, London in Bloom award-winning, serial award winner, park in the town centre, and it's when you capture these places, that, you know, being there at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's just, you get a complete different feel.
So we get a sense that what you want from growth and development in Sutton is you want the creation of places where you can dwell, where you can find peace, where there's some green space, maybe some open space, places that give you a sense of calmness.
Absolutely. I think again, looking at the public realm in the high street, I think obviously public realms, I know they, again, you know, they have to be useful. They need to be able to allow people to transit from one place to the other. But again, perhaps, you know, what does a green corridor mean in a town centre? What does, you know, how do we link up these spaces? You know, yes, we can throw in a few planters and a couple of trees, but we've got a green wall in Sutton, for example. I mean, that greening of a town centre would be quite unique, quite a draw, I think, and quite special, both in its aspect in what it looks like, but also in terms of its impact on the environment to some degree.
Let's talk a bit more now about your career and how you've arrived in this conversation as deputy leader at Sutton Council. What were the watershed moments in that journey?
I'm a very simple man, I think, and I've not had many watershed moments. I think for me it's been a continual journey. I think I was always somebody, I've always been somebody who has been fascinated in lots of things, but perhaps never dwelled too long on any one. From a very early age, when I now look back, obviously I didn't know at the time, to pin me down to do anything was quite difficult because I had a variety of interests. So I came to the point, and what I realised was that I was, and my career kind of reflected that as well. I started off as a surveyor myself. So that was my calling as a young adult. And I worked on quite a lot of big sites uptown, but then lost interest, not in construction, but in perhaps the organisations that I was working with. They weren't varied enough. I remember thinking I wanted to work with a different group of people. I just wanted to be in a different environment, and I could speak Italian, so I went down that path. So I ended up managing call centre for American Express, for the European call centre, and that led me down a different path where I ended up in pharmaceuticals. I've worked in kitchens, I've done music, I've done all sorts of things. But obviously, every time I did something, I was kind of starting from the beginning again to some degree, or I could transfer some skills, but that wasn't the point for me. The point was I was getting that buzz, that exhilaration out of trying new things, trying to learn something new. Life's too short to be stuck in one groove. Having said that, I've always admired, and the people I get on with the most are people who have done the opposite to me, which is, there's nothing better than being sat next to at a party somebody who's just come back from, I don't know, some South American jungle, and they've spent 5 years studying the mating cycle of a rare moth or something, and they've captured it on film, and they've written papers about it. I'm fascinated. I couldn't do it, but I'm fascinated by people who dedicate their time to science and to understanding the world better. The experts, let's face it. And I guess for me, I like listening. I like kind of piecing all those pieces together. I like, perhaps I'm less of the artist, but more of the curator. And I think what's led me here is, like I say, a steady journey where all those pieces have finally come together. And I did try other things. I thought I would move out of Sutton because familiarity bred contempt at a certain point in my 20s and 30s. I still had a home here, so I came back, but I did spend 6 months here, 6 months there. I was very lucky to do that.
Where did you go?
Well, around Europe primarily. I spent quite a bit of time in Italy, but I realised that where my heart was lured to some degree for greener pastures, I realised that the divots were just the same size, and moreover, they weren't my divots. Sutton's divots are my divots. So I came back with kind of renewed, repurposed. The familiarity that I felt bred contempt no longer did. So everything was beautiful again, even the ugly stuff was beautiful again, because they were my ugly bits. They were, the town centres, good and bad, are my good and bad.
What about the decision to kind of go into politics? Was that a gradual one, or was that a kind of one day it just suddenly came to you, I'm gonna run for council?
Yeah, I've never been. I've loved listening to politics and political programs, but I wasn't a party member or of any party. I wasn't an activist or anything like that. I had no particular desire, apart from anything. I didn't think I thought I'd left it too late. No, funnily enough, I managed to say at the bottom of Sutton there's an old disused toilet block by Sutton Green, and basically the long and the short of it was I lived in that area, and I kept walking past this toilet block that was shut down for obvious reasons. And I thought, wouldn't that? I think it was built in 1919. I thought, wouldn't that be a lovely little cafe? And so I eventually built up the courage to ring the council and say, what are you going to do with this? And then they put me onto a councillor at the time. She asked me to go and speak at a local committee. So I busied myself drawing plans of what I think it could be, and did a bit of study on it. And then I presented at the local council. And then, unbeknownst to me, they were going to knock it down. They'd set aside some public realm funds to knock it down. So that got scrapped. And then a few years later, it got developed into a cafe. And And then, yeah, it was just perchance that I recognised some faces, and I bumped into one of the councillors at the time, and I was at a bit of a loose end, and I thought, you know what, I'm tempted to ask them what do you need to do to become a councillor, and she told me, and yeah, and the rest is history, really.
But you said earlier that you like doing new things a lot, and you've moved from place to place, albeit you're a Sutton born and bred, and you're back there now for good, presumably. So how long do you think you're in local politics for?
As long as the residents want me.
So you're not drawing a line. You're not saying another 4 years and that's enough. I've done my bit. I'll go on to something else.
I'll tell you in 3 years and 11 months.
I know it's always a difficult question to answer because you're in the hot seat, but it's worth asking.
Yeah, no, I don't have. I mean, I'm still fascinated. It's funnily enough, it was one of those things that a friend of mine who was also interested in architecture, you know, we'd go cycling, off-road was more my bag, and we'd pitch up at a pub for an ale or a cup of tea at a cafe somewhere. And we'd end up just talking, and frequently we talk about the town centre, frequently talk about architecture and stuff like that. And in the back of my head, like perhaps a lot of residents, you kind of know what you want. It goes back to your wish list. But somehow, I don't know how, maybe it's lady luck, I found myself in a position where, whilst it's not within my gift, that I can potentially have an influence. And help Sutton be everything that it is and wants to be, and once was as well. I mean, it's the Sutton way, as we say here.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the final part of the interview, which is about what you do when you're not being deputy leader at the council. And you've mentioned a couple of things during the conversation already. You mentioned that you've done some stuff in music. Let's pick up with that. What form does that take? Do you play music? Do you attend? Is it a sort of professional interest?
Playing mostly, but yes, that's playing and listening. I have, again, a huge variety of. You can't pin me down on any genre because it all serves a purpose. It all has a place in life. Just like food is a huge thing for me, and like I've taught, I'm trying to teach my 3 young boys, 10, 7 and 4-year-old, it's that the world is there to be explored, and food is a great example of that, where, you know, I can't abide the notion that someone doesn't like any ingredient of any type, because at the end of the day, there's always a different way of doing it. You've got to challenge yourself, and you've got to find the way that suits. And, you know, no one would ever turn around, let's say, take chips. Sorry, I'm going really facile route here, but, you know, everyone likes chips, fine. But, you know, if you have a bad portion of chips, you don't say I don't like chips. You just say they weren't good at that place, or a cheese sandwich, they weren't good at, you know, they can't make a good cheese sandwich. I'll try somewhere else. Whereas when it comes to particular ingredients, somehow, you know, I don't like broccoli, or I don't like. Well, maybe you don't like it this way, maybe you like it that way. And I think for me, it's you know, life's there to be explored, constantly explored. And
what do you play, well, music-wise? What do you play?
The piano was my instrument of choice, but I'm probably quite rusty now. Yeah. I used to have a couple of sound engineer friends of mine, and we did a few tracks, but those days are long gone. And like I say, I've probably given up any dreams of stardom.
Can we find them on YouTube though?
It was before YouTube, thank God. My boys still sing it around the house, actually. The other day I found my son singing one of the songs that
What's it called?
Summer With You was the one he was singing.
Summer With You, viewers. Okay, go out and track it down. I guess it's not on Spotify, but we'll be able to find it out there somewhere.
I hope not. I hope.
You also mentioned off-road cycling. Is that something you do a lot of?
I used to do it every day. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, again, one of the other things that happened on my regaining my passion for Sutton, I guess, for want of a better word, is have a family quite late on in my life. I'm 51 now, So as I mentioned, I've got a 10, 7 and 4-year-old. So very much came back in my 40s and meant business, taking on more responsibilities than I've ever had. Probably making up for lost time. Maybe I am one of those moth investigators after all. But no, I spend a lot of time. I love spending time with the family when I can, and be it watching the film, being teaching them new things, and just being together is a great comfort and a great tonic.
How would your family describe you? If we asked your partner or one of your kids to describe you, what would they say?
Well, my 7-year-old this morning has developed his nickname that I'm the bald ogre. So that's one of them done. No, I think my kids would probably describe me as loving, firm, fair.
What about your friends? Would they say the same?
Yeah, I think firm and fair. I think I'm an honest. I don't. I don't look to. Yeah, I don't suffer fools gladly. But then it's that exchange of honesty that I'm after, and what I present to the table as well. At the end of the day, I haven't got time for time wasters. I know everyone's got their own drivers, got their own ambitions, and that's absolutely acceptable. And I'm on board with that. We're all different. Again, it comes back to personalities. We're all different. I wouldn't want people to be like me. I don't look for people like me. I look for people that are different to me. And variety is actually the spice of life.
And in terms of that, the role that you've got, because you get a lot of variety through the work that you're doing for the council, I imagine. But what is it in the work that you're doing that kind of takes you out of your comfort zone and makes you feel like you're doing something new and exciting and sort of refreshing?
Oh, you know what? Every day feels like that. I mean, the role itself. I've been a councillor since 2014, and I'm still learning. And I love that. And I think coming back to why am I doing this? I mean, it's something that I found, whereas before I would have reached a level of competency in any particular field and realized, okay, I get this, I'm good at it. Let's not. It's like when you're breaking up with a partner. Let's not. We've done our time together. I think we can move on to better things now. Whereas now with the council, it's very different. Every day is a challenge. Every conversation with a resident, with business, with community groups or other local authorities, whatever officers. We've got an amazing team of officers at Sutton who work so tirelessly, and they work together as well. I've got to say, there's a synergy between our departments which is immense, which is great. You don't always get that in local authorities, but yeah, I guess every day is different, and that's what keeps me stimulated. In fact, sometimes it's so different, I struggle to keep on top of it, because it's every day is a challenge. Every day is something new. Every day needs a particular attention. Like today, this is the first time I've ever done a webinar. I mean, this, I've been nervous as hell, but hey. We're 5 minutes over, Toby. Hey,
it's a great note on which to end, isn't it? I've been nervous as hell. Listen, David, you've given us the wonderful analogy for development of cooking chips. If you don't like them cooked one way, cook them another way until they meet people's tastes, and that's as good an analogy for development as I've come across. So thanks for that. And on that note, we're going to end the interview. So please accept my warmest thanks for taking part. And viewers, our voice of authority, the deputy leader of the London Borough of Sutton, Councillor David Bartolucci. And while the virtual applause is ringing across the internet, I'll thank you viewers as well for sparing the time to tune in and learn about the man helping to shape the vision for Sutton. Now we're going to be back on Thursday, the 4th of December, with a knowledge sharing webinar. We're going to learn from Barking and Dagenham's award-winning housing delivery team at Be First, how they've achieved what they've achieved. And that's part of our direct delivery awards program running from now until next May when the awards take place. So if you're involved in councils building homes, or you'd like to be, details for that event are in the chat and at 3fox.co.uk. Until the 4th, from our Voice of Authority, Councillor David Bartolucci, from Carter Jonas and GLE and Haptic Architects and London Square Partners, and from me and from everyone at 3Fox, good afternoon.